All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our current session, Insights as a Service, creating data products from your customers' data with Untitled. Untitled is the company that you're going to be hearing from today, and I'll introduce them shortly, but I'll introduce them right now, actually. So we've got our featured speaker, Aaron Peabody. He's the co-founder and CTO at Untitled firm. And Aaron and I have done a number of presentations together. He has a really wide wealth of experience in evaluating ETL and ELT tools. Just by the nature of Untitled's business, he's worked with a lot of different architectures and deployments of the modern data stack. So if you have any questions throughout the course of today's session, feel free to plug those into the chat. And we're a little bit time constrained. We've got 30 minutes, a lot of content to go through. So I'm going to stop talking and go ahead and hand the ball over to Aaron.
Cool. Thank you, Shane. So today we're talking about insights as a service, and then specifically like how to do that. So there's some foundational pillars to essentially consider as you build these deployments and are using customer data to provide insights back to those customers. So we'll cover what those pillars are. I'll show you some examples of an outcome of what that can look like if you are successful in standing up that foundation. And then I will also show you some patterns and strategies to consider as it relates to building these deployments. And then finally, I'll actually give you a look at the Untitled platform and holistically what it looks like and our core modules. And then if we have time at the very end, we'll be doing Q&A, but if not, I will be at the Untitled booth after this presentation, so would love for you to stop by, say hello, and we could keep the conversation going. So for starters, a lot of you might be familiar with what the traditional internal modern data stack is. And really the component parts of that are, one, the keys are going to be available. And so this is going to be different than external MDS deployment in a sense that for internal, you might have access to the sources that you need to pipe into the platform. You probably know the use case really well, and it's predictable in many respects. The architecture requirements, I'll put air quotes around linear, but they are linear in a sense that you're solving for a single directional problem. The data volumes are going to grow at a known pace. Now, that doesn't mean that that data isn't going to grow exponentially, but what it does mean is that you are aware of the growth of that data. Stakeholders can reach congruence. That might feel like a loaded statement because there's always politics involved with any product roadmap or what people need built when. But at the same time, you can kind of get everybody on the same page about what needs to be done. And then the organizational hierarchies are apparent. So you know the departments, the verticals, who should be able to see what data, who gets what dashboards, who can't see certain dashboards, etc. External MDS, so if we're doing the insights as a service route, is pretty much the exact opposite of that. So for starters, I just don't inherently have the keys to these data sources that we need to bring in. Our stakeholders, customers do, right? I don't necessarily know what you're going to use my system for or why you're using it. And because of that, the architectural requirements are highly variable. Additionally, the data sources are going to grow at an unknown pace. And I can give you a really specific example of this. When we actually launched our first prototype of our external MDS stack, within like a week, we had a business that maybe is like a $5 million business or whatever, but they had synced 150 million rows from a single connector, which was their MailChimp instance. And there was really no way for us to predict that, right? We couldn't have anticipated that that was going to happen. And so these are the types of problems that you're going to have to solve. And then finally, the organizational hierarchies are bespoke, meaning that I definitely don't know who needs to see what and who can see what data and who needs what dashboard. So that creates some problems, and really the solution is this flexible architecture with customization options that are going to support that nuance. But here's the trade-offs. So if you give the customers too much flexibility, it will naturally manifest the need for technical expertise and sophisticated onboarding processes. And if you give them too little flexibility, that customer is going to reach extensibility limitations really quick. And like the funny example of this is like, some of our users have high preferences and really sophisticated asks around timing the data, when they can get it, if they can export it to secondary locations, et cetera. And then at the same time, we have users that can't figure out a filter on a dashboard. And I promise you that if you're offering Insights as a service, likely the #1 support request you're going to receive is someone has their filter settings on, and then they think the data is wrong, and then they'll ask you about it. So bit of a balance that you need to strike there. So in order to solve for all of these problems that I've been talking about, whether it's untold row growth that you might have to anticipate in terms of how much data somebody's onboarding, the amount of customization that someone's going to need, the organizational hierarchies of who can have access to what. Really, the way to solve that is with like super good data ops practices. And so when I talk about data ops, what I mean is both software engineering design principles as well as best practice DevOps patterns. And that really falls into 6 categories, right? So you have to solve the problem of authenticating and onboarding data, right? That is going to be critical as it relates to providing Insights as a service. But additionally, you'll need to know and provide some really sophisticated security preferences and standards, both for the users, but then also on the architecture itself. The workflow and pipeline orchestration for external MDS is a lot more complicated than it would be for just an internal MDS project. You'll have to be thinking about data quality and veracity, because every organization that you invite to your platform, they're going to have different levels of data hygiene, and they might have some custom sources and not want certain data to get in there, which is really bespoke as well. And so with that said, that's going to be important. You're also going to need to make sure that the stack itself is highly resilient. And the reason being is if we have an outage with an external MDS stack, that doesn't just affect us and our internal stakeholders. That affects a lot of other businesses who might be using this tool to make decisions from. And then finally, with that said, you need really great continuous improvement and continuous delivery processes for that stack. And it should all be observable from a single location. So if you're able to pull all of that off, this is what it can look like, right? So here's some screenshots of Untitled's deployment. So basically, user can log in, they can connect their sources. They just go through a little wizard right here where they say how far back they want the data to go, how often they want it to update. And then consequently, they get these beautiful dashboards right away, right? So all of this stuff comes together for them quickly. They can use this product to drive business decisions, align stakeholders, make decisions about their everyday operating activities, predict things that are going to happen in the future. So there's a lot of power here, but also a lot of requirements to do this, right? So you're like, how do I do all of these things? Well, you got to prioritize what you're not going to build. So we talk about this a lot at Untitled, but what shouldn't we build is really an important conversation that always needs to be happening. And that's largely driven by the fact that there's so many great tools and platforms available now that solve each of these problems in isolation, right? So you'll need to know how to bring it all together, but you shouldn't build certain things that someone else has done and has massive teams and resources supporting, right? So in the old way, we were taught to build it first. And if we couldn't figure it out, we would source it from somebody, and then we would buy it. And buying it was like the last lender resort. And consequently, when you do it this way, fragility of that stack is always at risk, right? Let's just say you have a critical engineer that manages important pieces of the pipeline, and then they leave and no one knows how to fix that, right? Or if something goes down, it's entirely on your engineering and support team to solve that problem and get the stack back up. So there's no horizontal leverage there. This new way of buying it, sourcing it, and then building it as a lender of last resort, it has risks around functional limitations. So if you pick the wrong tools to solve the wrong problems, obviously that can be an issue. But if you can really clearly define the problem that you're trying to solve and then go into the market looking for products like Fivetran, as an example, to solve that problem, well, the advantages include incredible scale, speed by which you can have that thing ready to go in your platform, and then just the support that comes with it, right? All of the engineers that work at these different companies making their products better every day, more secure, faster, more scalable. And so we went about designing our whole stack with all of these pillars in mind. So now it wasn't like this the first go around, and I think that's important to say. Our first prototype was kind of a mess. We didn't consider all of these different pieces. And so this is why we can speak to these different pillars, is because we had to do this for ourselves. And additionally, Untitled also is a stack data consultancy. So we do these projects for other people all the time and are very familiar with all of the requirements and nuances of every business that we work with. And when we decided to design our platform, we didn't want to just design an external MDS application, right? We wanted to build something that could also create those things, whether it be for internal or external use. And so with all of that said and all of those pillars, we're going to go and actually dive in on each one specifically. And then I'll just provide some context, some examples, some patterns, how we've done it for ourselves. And that could be a take home if you're interested in actually providing insights as a service through some sort of SaaS offering or a product you want to put into the market. So for starters, authentication and data onboarding. So we did this kind of a messy way to begin. And it was basically like creating an email address that people would add to their source accounts, and then we would go manually authenticate these sources. There was a couple problems with this. For starters, people didn't know who data sources at Untitled Firm was. If it was on some Facebook account or Shopify account, maybe only one stakeholder knew that that email was being placed there, and it would get deleted, right? And so then the other stakeholder who actually uses the dashboards is like, my dashboard is not updating. Go in, check. Well, they deleted our login. That's the problem, right? So we spent a lot of time looking around in the market for a solution to solve this problem. And coincidentally, it was right around the time that Fivetran was rolling out an offering called Powered by Fivetran, which is really, really cool. Essentially, you just make some icons in your own portal, kind of like what you saw on the previous screens. The users can click that, and it goes through an authentication UI that user would to add us to something like Shopify. So essentially, they come in, they click that button. It goes through a couple steps. A Connect card pulls up, so it looks like a little OAuth 2 app modal, which is really pinging off the Fivetran API and actually setting up all of those pipelines programmatically. And so now, instead of us having to work with the users to get the access that we need, all of that stuff just happens, right? And the user is responsible for authentication. And to be honest with you, as we've gotten further into this, I would say that's the price of admission for Insights as a service. You do not want to have to manage those auth connections yourself. You want to pass that responsibility to the user. Additionally, because we're doing some more sophisticated stuff on the deployment side, which we'll get to later, we needed a secondary solution for our actual bridges to like our Untitled API, and then all of the resources on our infrastructure side that are needed for a single customer to be supported. So we opted for Auth0 for that, and we use that to federate both internal and external service bridges, as well as any type of resource paths that we need to know about and programmatically access throughout the infrastructure. So the other piece is you're going to want to have to think about partitioning and security. And this is not always the most fun part of the conversation for people. A lot of people just want to go in and start building and make something come to life. But if you do this the wrong way, and then, for example, your sales team sells a HIPAA customer, right? A customer that has HIPAA data, and you're going to run into some issues if you are going to try and support that or change that as an exception to that customer. Because usually and fundamentally, partitioning and security is a very deep architecture strategy. That's not something that just happens at the surface level, right? So the way that we've solved this problem is we use AWS organizations. That's not necessarily a new idea per se, but it's something that's quickly becoming best practice for these types of deployments. But we have a root AWS organization, and every customer that signs up for our platform has their own unique AWS account on the back end. And then we use a CI/CD strategy to update all of those accounts across the board from a single location, which is really, really great. And it also has this amazing partitioning that we get to take advantage of. So as we kind of go through these different sections, the one area that we have a multi-tenant data model is just our data warehouse, which I don't think should be surprising. But essentially, those multi-tenant locations are isolated. We know about them. And that's where we're going to use things like object, row, column level security preferences to filter that data based upon what people need to see and what they should see and what they should not see. But at the same time, these users also can opt to have their own storage destinations in our system. The only caveat to that is that if they're going to use their own storage destinations, that means that they have to bring their own BI tool, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So in order to see kind of how all of these services map together, I've put like a schematic of like the architectural layering of each of these respective things. So, someone logs into the Untitled portal, and then if you're looking horizontally across all of the services that we're using to solve these problems, this is what it looks like, right? So they have a root tenant and Auth0, or we do, and they have their own organization account. In AWS, we have our root organization, and everybody has a singular AWS account. We do this in GitHub as well, which is, kind of great. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is a part of just allowing customers to have a cutaway strategy if they want to decouple from our infrastructure. We use New Relic for the observability piece, right? And so everybody gets a New Relic sub account. In Fivetran, everyone has their own group and own destination. That destination can be redundant, right? But at the same time, it also could be unique in the event that the customer wants that. So if it's redundant, as in they're going to be using our stuff, our BI tool, and our embedded analytics solution, we put them in our multi-tenant data warehouse. And then we use Sisense Analytics for actually embedding our visualizations. And that's what our BI product is largely built on. But everybody has their own security group and respective data models. So additionally, let's say you figure out authentication, so you know how the data can be onboarded. You have a system to federate all of that and the supporting infrastructure across the board. You solve the tenant architecture problem and are able to isolate everybody. How on earth are you supposed to do the workflow and pipeline orchestration like you would think about it in an internal MDS stack, right? Well, the way that we've opted to solve this problem the second time around, so this is version 2, is using AWS Event Bridge to basically be a core routing and logic decision engine across the entire ecosystem. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we're doing these things on the Airflow and DBT side. But specifically, I will tell you a story from our own failings when we launched our first prototype of this. But basically, you have to pick between entirely event-driven or if it's going to be batch. And the reason why I say that is you never know what is going to be dependent upon the other in the event that, let's say, infrastructure isn't available, but data jobs are trying to run, or reverse, data is available, but the data jobs aren't. We want to make sure that all of those things are properly coordinated. And so we have chosen event architecture largely because we had this hybrid, and it unfortunately cost us quite a big AWS bill within about a week and a half of us launching this first version. So we had accidentally spent around $30,000 in 2 weeks with our first version launch. And so we decided to refactor all of that and try and make it as event-driven and isolated as possible. And we've done that with Event Bridge, and the supporting workflow tools are Airflow, DBT, and Snowflake. It might be a little bit too technically in the weeds talking about how we use Airflow and DBT specifically, but we run, the atomic model, how Airflow recommends, where every DAG runs basically 2 tasks and is isolated to each respective DBT model. And all of this happens in our Snowflake deployment. But additionally, if someone opts to use their own storage destination, we have templates that they can apply and attach to their infrastructure to coordinate that and time it up with our core Event Bridge engine. So you'll have to think about data quality and veracity, right? So I think DBT is quickly becoming a household name across the board. We use it all the time in pretty much everything. But we decided to take the package library concept and build our own package library in GitHub that we pull from and deploy across to all of these different stacks that we're supporting. Now, there's going to be something that definitely comes up if you're offering insights as a service, which is someone wants to attach a unique / custom data source to your pipeline. That might be an application database. It might be, some sort of workflow tool or project management system that they built from scratch. We have no idea what is in that or the structure of that respective data. So we've decided to actually build a mapping wizard that has categorical templates to map into. So a supporting schema that we decide. So all of these like CRMs and project management systems have a logical data hierarchy and the respective objects that would be inside of that hierarchy. So if someone needs to onboard a source that we don't support natively, we give them a wizard to do that in order to actually control the way that that data comes in, and all of those transforms can be universal afterwards. So you will definitely have to solve that problem. A mapping wizard and schema control is going to be critical for that. And then the last little piece here, we've started using this tool called Caster Docs, which has been amazing. The folks over there are salt of the earth, and we really liked this product. So I would encourage everybody to check this out. But it is like a comprehensive data documentation and governance solution that will definitely help you when managing a deployment this wide and complex. So you're going to want to introduce really good DevOps patterns into the mix when you're deploying this. Now, we didn't do this the first time. And the story of this, which is fun, is both across the services business as well as on our own platform. Our VP of engineering had been here for maybe a couple of weeks, and he asked me, how does everyone keep track of everything? Like, there's so much going on between these two, businesses, right? So the services business and the platform business. And my answer was not great as a startup CTO. I just said, we all have really good memories. That is not okay at scale, right? So if you're going to be doing this at scale and you want to offer a product like this, you very much should be using infrastructure as code methodologies, right? So right now, we use CloudFormation for all of the internal service infrastructure. And right now, Terraform for all the external services. It's one spot that we actually plan to kind of consolidate completely into Terraform. So there's just one thing to learn. But that is our method for ensuring that all of these stacks are very resilient, and our core infrastructure is very resilient, throughout our entire CI/CD process. Ooh, there we go. So this is kind of what that looks like, if you're curious. So I drew a very, very light diagram of how all of that works. But essentially, you have your internal infrastructure as code repositories. You have your external service infrastructure as code repositories. We have our DBT package library. And then we have BI tool templates and stuff in the event that someone picks their own destination. We have templates that are going to be congruent with the DBT and Airflow orchestration jobs that would be running in that solution. So this allows for some uniformity kind of across the whole ecosystem in order to ensure that it's repeatable, it's redundant, it's observable. If someone breaks something, we can update across the board. If we find a bug, we can update across the board. And this is really how we manage this thing holistically. So if we're going to bring it all together, this is really what it looks like, right? So we're a platform that isn't just external MDS. We're a platform that also is this unified data ops ecosystem. And it does take longer to build it this way, right? This is not easy stuff to do. But the caveat being that, and as a byproduct of doing this, we're able to offer uniformity with the products and new features that we want to push for our business. This has allowed us to deploy certain pieces of our services business and modules of those respective services contracts through this kind of point and click architecture. And fundamentally, it's allowed us to go from building MDS over periods of months, right, whether it's internal or external, to hours, right? And so this was a big jump for us, and it took a lot to get there. But consequently, it's all possible, right? And so I know there was a lot packed into this. They told me I had 30 minutes, so I was trying to get through as much as possible. But with that said, this is how we have done Insights as a service. So it's not so much about it categorically. It is a lot more about how to build it. And all of the considerations in the previous slides are things that we learned, through mistakes and trial and error. But the outcome has been amazing. And so despite the fact that this interface looks so easy to use and simple, there's a lot going on behind it. But that is all the credit goes to the Untitled team in really thinking about this and building this and designing this in a way that everybody could use. So yeah, that would be the presentation. Shane?
Aaron, thanks so much. The bad news is we only have 2 minutes left. The good news is that Untitled has a booth, and Aaron's going to be there, I think, for the rest of the afternoon.
That's
to
right.
Unpack any of these concepts that you'd like to dig into more, whether it's trying to deploy your own data product or potentially understand more about Untitled services. So I'll put up the contact info right there if you'd like to follow up outside of the booth. And if there are any questions that come in the last 2 minutes, we're happy to field those, so plug those in. I did want to double tap a little bit on, again, because of your familiarity with the ETL data integration ecosystem, you said that you landed on Powered by Fivetran. I believe in your path, you were evaluating a few other tools, including Stitch. Maybe you could talk a little bit about why you ended up using Fivetran versus some of the other tools out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think our process of picking Fivetran, it was really, really rigorous. You can ask the sales team about that. But we had just pages of notes on things that we wanted to make sure were possible, right? And so there's really three things here, right? So first, it checked, let's call it 95, 98% of the technical requirement boxes. So that was really good. But secondly, and more importantly, the Fivetran team is truly a partner to Untitled. They genuinely care about our business. It's very evident. And so like we sense that really early on in the conversations. And then the last piece is it's just really easy to set up. I mean, I told you that, Shane, like right before we jumped on, like I'm a big fan and very enthusiastic of PBF because it allows you to build some really cool stuff really quickly. And so between the technical requirements being met, knowing that we had a true partner in this, and then also just the ease of access and use, PBF was an obvious choice.
Great. And I know we're at time, and I believe lunch is up next. Kramer, who's the CMO at Untitled, plug in a link to the chat if you'd like to follow up immediately and get some of those questions asked. But again, Untitled going to be around all day at their booth. So thank you so much, Aaron. I didn't think we were going to make it through in that 30 minutes, but you timed that up perfectly. So
really had to start hauling.
in terms of what is next, we've got at 1 o'clock Pacific time, leveling up your financial analytics. So thank you, everyone, for your attention, and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you after.